when we say love thy neighbor, मतलब ये philosophical है या फिर आज के अगर हम परिप्रेक्ष्य में देखें, is it really worth loving our neighbors?
Chanakya says, if you look at timelines in politics, it's also a power game.
How does Chanakya look at these kind of psyche of the population?
Singapore never existed in the world map. Okay, it's a new country in the history of humanity.
Okay, so that is the psyche probably of a Napoleon or a Genghis Khan or an Alexander.
Your productivity and my productivity is not just about 1 hour. What I can do, 24 books in maybe last 15 years. 2025, I'm talking about this year. This year specifically, I told.
That time?
Yeah, that India will become a global.
Hello friends, welcome to another wonderful episode of Geopolitics with खिलाड़ी नंबर 1. कहते हैं कि लव दाई नेबर, पड़ोसी से हमेशा आप प्यार करते हैं, प्यार करना चाहिए, ऐसा कहते हैं. लेकिन इंडिया इज ब्लेस्ड विद फैंटास्टिक नेबर्स, पन अनइंटेंडेड. बट द फैक्ट रिमेन्स कि आज के जमाने में हमारे जो पड़ोसी है भारत में, उनके साथ हम कैसे रहें, उनके साथ कैसे डील करें, क्या उनके साथ प्यार भरा व्यवहार करें या क्या, इन बातों पर चर्चा करने के लिए आज हमने ये एपिसोड खास बनाया है. और इसमें कम से कम 2,500-3 हजार पहले जो बातें कही गई हैं वो आज भी कैसे रेलेवेंट है. वील टॉक अबाउट दैट. आई एम पंकज अठवले एंड टुडे इट्स अ ग्रेट प्लेजर दैट आई वेलकम अ वेरी वेरी डियर फ्रेंड ऑफ माइन, एक्सपर्ट ऑन चाणक्य नीति, a very well known author, India's best selling author of corporate Chanakya, and of course a very wonderful academician. Please welcome Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai. Dr. Pillai, welcome.
Thank you, Pankaj sir. It's an honor to be with you.
Once again, after many years, we are back again. When we say love thy neighbor, मतलब ये philosophical है या फिर आज के अगर हम परिप्रेक्ष्य में देखें, is it really worth loving our neighbors as a country now?
So philosophically, it's a suggestion that you should love your neighbor.
Okay.
Because it's not easy.
Okay.
Politically, there are no permanent friends or enemies.
Okay.
So according to Chanakya, your immediate neighbor is a threat.
Is it?
Yeah. But enemy is a friend. So neighbor's neighbor can be a friend. Now the thing is that it's also time related.
Correct.
So let me give an example. Chanakya says, if you look at timelines in politics, it's also a power game.
True.
So there are 3 factors in which your neighbors become your friends or enemy. Factor number 1, okay, who is more powerful?
Amongst the neighbors.
Yeah. So I'll give you example. Second is basically who is more weaker than you and who is equal to you.
Okay.
So let's say 2 countries, okay. Let's say India and Nepal. If you look at the land mass, the economy, who is more powerful?
India is powerful.
Yeah. So there you have an advantage. Or if you look at maybe Burma, or if you look at Sri Lanka.
Correct.
So they are weaker than you. Equal to you, India, China.
Right.
Or maybe to some extent Pakistan, not very much, but still, if you look at it. So, okay, but not many. So China could be the best comparison.
Correct.
Now, who is stronger than you here? That's where the game starts. Interestingly, it's human nature to be number 1. So, it's like, how we learn in schools. Class mein first time. Arey, pass ho gaya. वही बड़ी बात है. But then you aspiration. So if you're playing cricket, you better win the World Cup.
Correct.
I mean, the biggest pain that we had in Indian cricket was losing not the semi-final, but the finals. And by the way, number 2 is also not bad.
Yeah, but everyone wants to aspire to be number 1.
Correct. So even in geopolitics, what Chanakya says is that everybody aspires to be number 1 in a game where there are many players. Gully cricket ho ya World Cup ho.
Correct.
And the term for that is called as Vijigishu.
Vijigishu.
No. So it's a very technical term. A person who wants to be a world conqueror.
Okay, so that is the psyche probably of a Napoleon or a Genghis Khan or an Alexander.
Correct.
Or anyone else.
Anybody who wants to conquer the world will actually start with showing a might, which is generally the military might. But now I think over a period of time, it's technology might, it's economic might. It's also, a lot of foreign policies. So that's where it is starting with your neighbors, but you keep expanding. बोलता पहला खुद का देखो, फिर आजू बाजू का देखो, then you start looking at the whole world.
Correct.
Why would somebody sitting in Australia be worried about India?
Right.
today is an interconnected world. Why would America be interested in what's happening between India and Pakistan or India and China? They are. So I think it's like, a ripple effect. Start with yourself. Look around your neighbors who is powerful, weaker, stronger, equal. Then expand. But till you win the World Cup, the game is not over. Interestingly, even if you win the World Cup, the next World Cup is coming.
Exactly. The game is never over.
Yeah.
Now, that is something very interesting. And then generally, the common man, a common human person, or common Indian, इनका कैसा रहता है कि it's a very binary thought process.
Correct.
Okay, पाकिस्तान ने ऐसा किया, बांग्लादेश ने ऐसा किया, ठोक दो, खत्म करो, and then we are back to a normal life. But that actually does not happen. So, do you think that the general population sometimes does not understand dynamically कि भाई हमारे neighbor से कितना क्या करना चाहिए? और सडनली हम दोस्ती करो, ये करो, प्यार करो, ये करो, या फिर एकदम से गुस्सा करो. How does Chanakya look at these kind of psyche of the population?
Correct. So, two things. Chanakya is absolutely speaking about what is called Raja Vidya. It is not Praja Vidya.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, a lot of people, initially I also used to think that Chanakya should be taught to everyone. I still teach to everyone. But there is a maturity required for people to understand Chanakya. Because Raja Vidya is like doing PhD.
Correct.
Okay? Everybody should have basic education. How to live a moral life, how to be a good husband, wife, contributor, taxpayer. But Raja Vidya is a different ballgame. And Chanakya was a Rajaguru.
Right.
So the idea is that for a common man, we always say, chalo yaar, pyar dosti mein raho, theek thaak hai.
Chodo jane do.
And that's the right approach. But as you get into the power game, that game changes. Like I always say, basic education, you will have 60 students in the class. Okay? And this whole school may have 10,000 students. But as you go higher and higher and higher, the number of people doing graduation becomes lesser.
Correct.
Post-graduation becomes lesser. PhD even lesser. And let me tell you, in PhD, it's always one teacher, one student.
Exactly. Whereas in a school, one teacher, maybe 60 or 100 students.
Yeah. So the idea is that the common man always has got this nice attitude of being, chalo, mil baat ke pyar se karo, live and let live. But unfortunately, when it goes bigger, it's survival of the fittest.
Right. Very important. Dr. Pillai, now when we talk about Acharya Chanakya, where he actually learned and worked as a Acharya, today that place is in Pakistan. The kind of work that he did and the kind of fundamentals. Now, how can someone be so intelligent that even after 2,500 years, the fundamentals still hold?
True. See, fundamentals don't change. Never will change. Yet, it has to be adapted to the changing ecosystem. So, let me give an example. Let's say health. Be it 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, or after 2,000 years or 5,000 years, health will be a priority for everyone. Right?
Then, now,
and forever. So, it is a basic fundamental that everybody has to be healthy. But the way of health will change generation to generation. Like today, the way we work, the biggest health problem is stress.
Correct.
Then you say, okay, work out, have this protein, that protein. Our Dadiba never knew about gymming. But she also was concerned about health, the right diet. Now, if you look at it, what Chanakya is actually telling us is that fundamentals don't change, they are principles.
Okay.
But every generation has to adapt to certain new practices. Like maybe 2 generations ago, communication meant public speaking.
Correct.
How do 2 people talk? Today, it's about the right texting. So, if I can communicate nicely over a text. 1 generation ago, it was writing the best letters.
Yes, or the email.
It has to be legible. But tell me one thing, what is communication? Is it just about typing, writing, speaking? No. It fundamentally, are you able to convey something which is in my mind to your mind? Can you touch the hearts? So, I remember college days when you had to propose a girl. So that time you had to write some letters or greeting cards or sing a song. Now it may not be there.
Correct.
Yet if you're not touching the heart, you're not conveyed a point. So in political science also, it's a power game. Fundamentals don't change. That's what we call natural laws and principles. The sun will rise from the east. If you go deeper, actually sun never moves, we move around. That doesn't change. Yet, I can use sun differently. Today, I can use it for solar energy.
Right.
Today, you can use sun for maybe my better digestion. So people say, before sunset, have your food. Now, the idea is that sun will never change its fundamental heat and light. but you are connected it. So with changing times, adapt, but don't miss out on the fundamentals.
Very, very important. Now, that's something which probably Indian government or India is now following. Now, another very interesting question comes in. India is now looking at a policy called Far East, look east further. Now, you mentioned earlier that your neighbor is your enemy and then look further ahead. Now, today the situation, Dr. Pillai, is such that we have to look further and further ahead. Now, with someone like a Turkey or a Azerbaijan having a different thought process, but an Iran having, they are not our direct neighbors, but they are having a different thought process. Uske beech mein Balochistan bhi hai. If you look on east, we have Myanmar, but we also have the Arakan army, then the Thailand and other places plus China. So, where does it stop? Or how far do you need to look beyond your neighbors also in a geopolitical situation?
So let me start by answering with a question. How many countries in India, in the world, including India?
202?
Correct. So let's put a round figure, 200 countries.
Right.
How many neighbors?
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay, 7 to 8 neighbors around you. Okay. So do you think you're only concerned with the immediate 7, 8 neighbors or concerned with all the 200?
Again, depends on situation.
Now, that's where I say, start with yourself, expand, but then you go to the next level. Chanakya speaks about 7 levels of neighbors.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
For example, my immediate neighbor is China. Okay. Now, China has got a neighbor called Japan.
Right.
Okay. Now, what happens is that if I skip it, okay, Japan becomes my friend. Let's look on the other side. India, Pakistan, friendly neighbors. Now,
Afghanistan
becomes my friend. And Afghanistan and Pakistan will have a problem.
Correct.
Let's expand further. Okay. Afghanistan further, Turkey.
Right.
Okay. Turkey becomes Afghanistan's problem, but Turkey becomes friend of Pakistan.
Look at the...
Yeah. Now you take it this way, or you go that way.
Correct.
So ahead of India, okay, you have Tibet, you have China, Nepal,
Russia.
Go below. Where does it stop? It doesn't stop because world goal hai. So everything is included.
Right.
But what we don't see is that right now, because there is an India-Pakistan problem or India-China problem. Okay, you know what Chanakya says? Your biggest threat is somebody who's very small.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So let me ask you, there is one small country called West Indies.
Correct.
It's not even a country.
It's a group of Caribbean.
Can they be a threat?
If you look at it normally, you will say no.
Consider that also.
Oh, so almost you have 180-degree phase shift on the other side.
No connections, no oil, no people. I'll give you an example. Singapore, okay. Singapore never existed in the world map. Okay. It's a new country in the history of humanity.
Right.
What is Singapore? If you study it, you'll be surprised. It's an offshoot of Malaysia.
Correct.
And it was a discarded place. In fact, there's a joke. And even Singaporeans tell this, we never got freedom from Britishers. So, like we have India, Pakistan fighting against the British, Malaysia and Singapore was one country.
Correct.
So, they said, ho gaya abhi, Britishers chale gaye. Now, you manage yourself independently.
Humko nahi chahiye.
Nahi chahiye. It is like the most, it is like what we say, maybe a slum area. That part it's a small city.
Correct.
And they literally pleaded, saying that we fought, Lee Kuan Yew. We fought with you for freedom. Now, freedom mil gaya, to humko discard kar rahe ho because we don't have any resources, we don't have anything. But Malaysia said no, nothing do it. They're one country. But then they said, okay, no problem. Abhi kitna roenge, kitna gidgidayenge. Lee Kuan Yew showed leadership. And today Singapore is like literally the South Asia Pacific economic hub.
Absolutely.
Now look at countries where, Middle East we talked about. Generally, they have a lot of, reserves of oil. Okay. Oil may go away tomorrow after 20, 30 years.
Right.
You'll be surprised. Today we are talking about, minerals and metals which are very rare. Okay. So tomorrow if a new industry comes up, therefore Chanakya is absolutely clear. You should have a strategy against equals, somebody bigger than you. But what's your counter strategy of absolutely unknown person who is sitting somewhere who has got no direct relation with you?
But you still need to think about that and strategize.
Absolutely. Because सबसे छोटा ही बड़ा होने वाला है. And जो आज बड़ा है कब छोटा था? How many of us have thought about the China that we talk about? Okay, almost compared to US and all those things, was not even part of World War I and II.
Yeah, till 1970 it was kind of a most poor country.
What happened suddenly?
Right.
Okay, and one of those countries called Japan, where India also took help. In fact, Subhash Chandra Bose went to Japan, Singapore, all those stories to form his Indian National Army. Okay. In fact, there are political economists who say that, Japan may not exist on world map after a few years.
Oh, because of the birth rate.
Absolutely.
So they are not actually producing children. So you may cease to exist.
Correct. So a country which had a say, they had a Pearl Harbor, they could be as powerful as US, and of course US gave back in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But maybe after a few generations, our grandchildren may say, अच्छा Japan कहाँ पे था?
हुआ करता था.
हाँ, because Singapore नहीं था maybe during a few generations ago. So the idea is that as a political study map who is currently in the game, but also be ready कि tomorrow's startup can actually beat up the Tatas and the Birlas.
That's very, very interesting. Now, in this case, another question arises, ki how do you then calibrate the timeline? Because who goes up, who goes down? It's a very dynamic and a very difficult process.
Correct. So what is, according to you, the understanding of time in India? Maybe a Sanskrit or a Hindi word for time in our culture?
Samay?
There are more than 25 words.
Oh, Samay is one of them.
It's one of them.
Yeah.
For example, the Mahabharata serial B.R. Chopra, it starts with May Samay.
Right.
It's also Kal.
Kal, correct.
It's also Manavantara.
Manavantara is also time.
Pal.
Pal.
So
Kshana.
Kshana. So Pratikshanam. Every moment to moment. And we also interestingly have Devatas for time. Kala Bhairav.
Right.
Kal. So in India, time is not just a clock. So I'll give you an example before I come to the timelines in geopolitics. Okay. If I were you to imagine the concept of time, imagine in a form, in a drawing, what would come to your mind first?
Probably a clock.
Correct. That's only measurement of time. 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock.
Right.
I was doing this workshop in a school. Very interesting. I told children, please show time in an imaginary form. One girl actually drew a heart. Why?
Very interesting.
Exactly. So what's your concept? Why heart? You know what she do? For me, time is my love my father gives to me by spending quality time.
So, look, that's her perception.
Yeah. Then, okay, one girl had a flower. It takes time for flower to
bloom.
I was surprised there was an old man stick. Time.
It signifies.
Yeah, because it's an old man using a stick.
So
you see, somewhere we have got used to time means seconds, hours, but we have a concept of yuga also.
Correct.
So there's a very famous Marathi book called Yugantar. And I think the Sahitya Akademi winner also. एक युग का अंत है and युग का शुरुआत भी होता है. In English we call it era.
Right.
And according to Chanakya, it all depends on the leader. So there's a Mahabharata statement which also Chanakya uses, Raja Kalasya Karanam. Everything depends on the leader.
Right.
So whether you are an absolutely poor country, it doesn't matter. The leader is right, you can become rich. And vice versa. You may be the richest country. You get a bad leader, you're gone. So the question is not when, the question is who.
So you got to keep a track now. We have very interesting leaders all across the world, be it the new president of the USA or the president of Russia, or you have China, the big ones, or leaders even from smaller, for example, like an Israel. So it's a very interesting point that it's about the leader who arises at that particular time, he or she. And that's how the entire country, and that will also impact you because something is happening in the neighborhood.
Absolutely. And let me also tell you, I don't know if you've seen that movie called Lion King.
Yeah.
A very famous, I think, Mufasa was the second part and all. You know, in the first part of Lion King, there's a very interesting question. So they're shown, everybody's unhappy, the jungle, because the other guy is a king. He's killed the father of Simba and all that things. So there's an old monkey. He says, wait, a leader will come.
Right.
So many times, when people get frustrated, or Chanakya says, wait, आएगा. अपना समय आएगा.
Or in fact, with this point, फिलहाल India का समय चल रहा है.
Yeah.
What happens is we need to kind of figure out that अपना समय आने वाला नहीं है, चल रहा है, and you should take up that.
And let me also tell you, Swami Vivekananda said this. 2025, I'm talking about this year. This year specifically, I told
That time.
Yeah, that India will become a global leader. Maybe just 1 month ago or 2 months ago, we didn't even know that India-Pakistan Pelgam would happen. We never even thought about it. But 2025 is India's time to become a global leader.
Yes, now we are sending delegations to different countries.
They are coming here.
Yes, they're coming here. Very interesting. Now, this is something we can actually keep on talking about a lot of things. You know, you mentioned you should love thy neighbor, as Acharya Chanakya says. But let's talk about your books. You have been writing. The first thing is, we eat, drink, and sleep. Do you write while eating, drinking, and sleeping? Because this is a 24th book that has come now. And one of the most bestsellers, Chanakya's 100 Best Sutras. How do you find time? 24 hours is there for everyone.
Again, come back to time. By the way, let me also tell you, time is a concept of the mind. And time is different for everybody. So we may think 10 o'clock and your 10 o'clock is the same. Yeah, that's one thing.
Measurement-wise.
Measurement-wise. Because you have to wrap up this in a particular time.
Yes.
Audience are listening, they require a particular time. Or kabhi khatam hoga.
Producer is also saying, bas ho gaya.
Now, but the point is that from a mind and a personality, time differs. For example, you must have seen in organizations and offices, if you give work to one person, he can take 1 hour, another person can take 10 minutes. Correct? So what happened? Same work, but different time zones.
Right.
And let's say women naturally are multitaskers. For them, they can do this and this and this. हम बोले यार,
ये नहीं होगा.
But maybe you can do certain things which they can't do. So time, according to Chanakya, is also personality driven. Your productivity and my productivity is not just about 1 hour. What I can do, 24 books in maybe last 15 years. By the way, I have a target of writing 100 books.
Really?
I'm writing 4 more.
Unbelievable.
And specifically this lifetime.
Yeah, so
maybe you can do 10 podcasts in a day, which I can't do. Because now you have mastered a trade.
Right.
And let me tell you, every field, be it sports, be it entertainment, politics, if you look at after a level of maturity, time is not a constraint.
Correct.
I'm sure if you look at the presidents and prime ministers of countries, you know, I was surprised when I saw this prime minister was in morning here, and afternoon here, and evening here.
Exactly.
And in between he's doing administrative work, he's doing interviews. Kaise karte ho? You don't know because that's not your field. Maybe I know how to write books.
Correct.
You know how to do a podcast, you know how to do an interview. In the same way, maybe a hero for our sports industry in cricket, Virat Kohli, or a Rohit Sharma, or anybody, you know, they can play multiple things.
Right.
Maybe a couple, they've had all-arounder skills. So how do you become an all-arounder? I still remember, you need to have one skill, batting or bowling, but there were players
who had multiple skills.
Yeah. And they could do, I mean, Ravi Shastri is still a champion of champions.
1985.
And he could ball also, hit sixes also, commentary also. Then you say, how come? So first things first, what Chanakya says, know your swadharma.
Correct.
What you're good at. Make it a skill, make it an attitude, and make it a commitment for life. Time will come behind you.
Unbelievable. And this is, in fact, a very, very important note for all the youngsters who are watching us. Swadharma आपको करना है और आचार्य चाणक्य ने भी यही कहा है. What message would you like to give us youngsters to know more about geopolitics so that they can follow our channel also?
3 things definitely. I would say study a lot. See, a lot of people get carried away by what is there in the media. See, we are media people.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, study is different from just gathering information. So what do you mean by study? Reading books, watching podcasts, and you know, so even newspaper cuttings is an input. But study is when you discuss with experts.
About what you have read.
Yeah. So for example, let's say politics. You may like a party, you may not like a party. That's a different thing. So there are newspapers, there are channels. One of them supporting, one of them anti.
Right.
Study both.
So your ideology may be whatever, but you need to know about
counter views. And then you put your own independent mind. The first thing is for geopolitics study. Okay, we have a counter argument with Pakistan. Pakistan may have a counter argument with me. Now there is an American way of looking at geopolitics of India, Pakistan.
Correct.
There's an Australian way of looking at it. Maybe India has a way to look at Australia differently. New Zealand has a way of different. So, you know, you have to be widely read and deeply read.
Correct.
Second, discussion with experts. Because what you read is not necessarily everything in the world. What is reported need not be the only thing happening in that field.
Possible.
I am sure the hundreds of tournaments happening across the world, which never gets media coverage, but they're
Yes.
still happening. And you know, as an expert of the field. So first is go and speak to experts. So for example, if I want to know about sports, I just want to sit with you for 1 hour. I can travel the whole world without traveling.
But by discussing.
Yeah. So in geopolitics, there are so many experts. In fact, I would say for starting and beginners of geopolitics, please Google and gather information of global think tanks.
Right.
And they are doing this work. They may be studying 24 hours and giving you that instant
Perspective.
or insight into that field. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So first of all, you study. Second is experts. Third thing about geopolitics, do something about it.
Not just sit on the chair and become armchair commentators.
For example, now I say I am not into geopolitics. You may not be, but you study, talk to an expert and say, okay, what are you doing? So I am doing some work, and maybe I'm going to China for maybe a geopolitical meeting. I'm representing a committee, a delegation. And there's so many chambers, like Indo-American Chamber of Commerce would be there. Associations are there. Go there and become an intern. Take up a small project. And you'll be surprised. Now you're not an outsider.
Right.
So let's say in sports, it's okay to be a ball boy, yeah? But get into the game. Ground क्या है पता नहीं हो TV में जो दिखता है.
Some ball boy in 1987 became the greatest player.
Correct. But get into the. You should have skin in the game. So if you want to be in geopolitics, don't just study analyze because that's important. Don't just discuss. That's also important. But they're basics. But get into the game.
Get into the game.
I'll tell you one instance. I remember Government of India. Okay. So I work with so many projects of the government. Very interesting once it happened. So there was a girl, okay, and very young girl. She may be hardly 24, 25. Okay, she was called by the Government of India for making some policy decisions in defense. And by the way, she's not even from the Army, Navy, Air Force.
Then?
So when I met her, I said, how come you are hardly this much? 25 years old,
and not even.
And you are advising the defense ministry, and she said they also pay me professionally.
Okay.
So, but how come? You know what she told me? That was very interesting. And for all the young boys and girls, this is a tip. And I said, tip, you'll be surprised what I'm going to tell next. So, one day I got a call from the ministry, Badava, saying that we want some suggestion of yours.
Okay.
On geopolitics. But this is like in between us and all those things. Okay, because they are national security things. So she went over there. And they're saying that we actually read a paper of yours you wrote in college about India-China relations.
That girl had written something about it, and the ministry and everyone had a view, okay, someone is there, and that's why they called her.
And then I should go, give me more details. Samajh mein nahi aa raha,
not viable now.
Do you know what happened? So she's 25, so maybe around when she was doing something about, I think, mass communication or something. She's not even a geopolitical expert, let me tell you.
Okay.
Not even studied geopolitics. So it was some mass communication, and when she was in college, she was in Delhi University or something like that. Okay. Her professor gave her a project.
Okay.
Saying that future of social media, what do you think?
Banao kuch.
10 years ago. So project le liya, assignment hota hai na, marks ke liye. So this girl was interestingly very deep in study. So she somewhere had a hypothesis that some of the best social media work is actually happening in China.
Interesting.
10 years ago when she's a student, doesn't know anything. So she was discussing with her father, and fortunately she comes from a very rich community and rich family. So पापा मेरे को ऐसा assignment करने का मन है. ऐसे घर पे माँ पिता के साथ बात करते कैजुअल.
कॉलेज में दिया है.
कॉलेज में दिया है. You know what? The father was a businessman, and he could, look at. He said, if you want to study China, go to China.
Really? He gave that suggestion?
Yeah. And because they could afford it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, हाँ मुझे 1 महीने में report करने काम करो, 15 दिन के लिए चले जाओ. Have some contacts there. He was a businessman.
Correct.
So I will set up this. She went to Beijing, stayed there for 15 days, studied, actually went to colleges, found out what is the social media future in China. Now what happens? Over, she comes back, she prepares a report, she gives it to the professor. India, China, social media, future or whatever. Forgotten, marks ho gaya, pass ho gaya, nikal gayi. When the government was doing something about China studies, they came to Delhi University because Delhi wahan pe hai. So they asked the professor and saying that, we are looking at social media, we are looking at cyber wars. between countries, geopolitics. Because there's no more military wars. That's
Exactly.
only one. Today, space wars, cyber wars. So this professor casually told
कि ये
एक 10 साल पहले कोई लड़की थी, उसने कुछ ऐसा चाइना में जाके बड़े करके देखा, एंड शी हैड प्रिपेयर्ड अ रिपोर्ट एज एन असाइनमेंट, द फ्यूचर ऑफ सोशल मीडिया इन चाइना.
डिपार्टमेंट से लाओ,
तो लेके आओ. बोले नहीं यार, वो तो नहीं होगा, मेरे पास कॉपी नहीं, बिकॉज दैट्स एन असाइनमेंट, इट्स नॉट ए पीएचडी थीसिस और ऑल. So एटलीस्ट यू नो द गर्ल्स नेम. तो इट कॉल द सेक्रेटरी. ओ यार 10 साल पहले फॉर्चुनेट सेक्रेटरी रिमेंबर दैट नेम. बोलते कैन यू गिव अ कॉन्टैक्ट. हमको से कोई, बिकॉज दे पास्ड आउट 10 years ago, some student, one of them out of 100, 1%, but the topic was interesting.
Correct.
Now this girl fortunately had a copy of that.
Oh.
For whatever reason she must have kept it somewhere.
Yeah.
So these people like, can you tell us which are the social media? And you'll be surprised when they studied, they're exactly the same apps that the government of India banned.
Later on.
Yeah.
So you were trying to say that if even a common person can get involved, study, discuss, and be a part of it, you never know when we can
she was a part of it. She went, understood,
Correct.
and she become an expert.
And I think that's the way we can actually contribute. The army is doing, the government is doing, but what can we do? I think we can do something like that.
We should, because sitting on the fence and watching the game, we enjoy it, right? But being there, understanding the, so get into geopolitics, not just as something to read. You should read, but get into it, and maybe tomorrow you become an expert.
And you may make a difference for the country.
Absolutely. And the world.
Yeah, on the world, absolutely. On that note, Dr. Pillai, thank you very much for gracing this occasion and coming here. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. We'll definitely look forward for more such episodes on different aspects.
I look forward to meet you every day.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It's an honor.
Thank you.